There we go. We're going to record this and have a transcription of our chat, which will include questions, resources, links, and all that stuff that will be posted on our website. So anyone that wants to see that after the fact will be able to reference it then. I'm going to throw in the chat a link to our United COVID Relief Fund. We're nearing the end of this fund for those of you that haven't heard about it. So the Veterans Chamber of Commerce is collaborating with Lift for the 22 to create this United COVID Relief Fund. These dollars go directly to veteran serving nonprofits in the state of Wisconsin. So if you want to have a targeted impact on veteran serving nonprofits in the state of Wisconsin, please donate to this fund. Every single dollar has been pledged to be matched up to $10,000 by an anonymous donor. So if we're getting very close. I know the bar, if you click the link, says 3,874. We actually had a $5,000 donor, so it's 8,874. So we're within about $1,200 of our goal, and again, all of those dollars are going to get matched, and that money will be distributed to targeted veteran serving nonprofits in the state of Wisconsin. We all know that the nonprofit world has been turned upside down by this pandemic and our safer at home measures and the impact that it's had on our business and our communities and whatnot. It's turned the nonprofit world upside down. So when veteran serving nonprofits succeed, veteran lives and livelihoods are saved and preserved. The military family life and livelihoods are saved. So please consider clicking on that and donating. Every little tiny bit counts. And again, it's matched, so please consider that. The last thing I wanted to talk about was we have an event coming up at the end of the month. We started our masterclass series yesterday talking about LinkedIn, and our masterclass series will continue at the end of the month with a briefing on how to get the most out of Twitter, taught by our resident Twitter expert, Randy Bryce, who has an absolutely massive Twitter following. So he's going to tell you how to actually get the most out of that platform. So I'm going to write Twitter Masterclass, and I'm going to share the link right there. Boom. Excellent. And those are my only housekeeping items. So I will let our distinguished guests further introduce themselves, but without further ado, we are joined this morning. We're very fortunate to have with us Congressman Gallagher and Kurt Bauer here to be sharing various COVID-related information at a local and a federal level, and beyond, and everything in between. If you have questions, please throw them in the chat, just ongoing. Put them in the chat feature, and I'll moderate and throw those questions in. We will have a Q&A at the end, so for those of you that are calling in that can't use the chat feature, just sit tight and we'll be able to address your questions here in a bit. But Mr. Bauer, Congressman Gallagher, please take it away.
Great.
Congressman, I'll have you go first.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me. First of all, the point of order, I think unfinished basements are cool, so you should consider never even putting a ceiling on. It gives you sort of a man of the people look. I've been doing most of my work from my basement office here, and that's where I'm joining you, from the basement in Alloway.
That makes me feel better.
Really appreciate you guys letting me join you. Thanks to Kurt too for everything he's been doing. There's a lot, I mean, just an incredible amount of work he's been doing behind the scenes too, to think through productively what is the next phase of this. How do we do what we need to do to keep people safe and slow the spread of the disease, while also making sure our economy doesn't totally tank. And Kurt's really been a thought leader on that issue. I am, however, angry that he's wearing a tie right now, because as you can see, I'm just wearing a Bucks pullover. So Kurt, you're making me look very bad right now, and I don't appreciate that. But I'll try and be brief. As you all know, Congress, we've done sort of 3 phases of legislative action so far. The 1.0 was seems like ages ago. It was just a straight up nearly $10 billion appropriation for the medical community and for CDC and others to help fight this disease. Then we had a 2.0 bill where we expanded sick leave and paid family leave to help people stay home, particularly if they were dealing with the symptoms of coronavirus, to slow the spread. And then the third and most important leg of this stool was the CARES Act. This was the $2 trillion bill that we passed in order to prevent the total economic freefall that we've seen as we've shut down our economy. And in a lot of ways, I think the centerpiece of the legislation is what's called the Paycheck Protection Program. If you're hearing PPP thrown around, don't confuse it with PPE. PPE, all of us who are veterans, we're familiar with that term. Now it's being used in a different context for masks, ventilators, and things like that. But the PPP is that $350 billion in loans to small businesses across the country, much of which can be forgiven if businesses meet certain employee retention and payroll thresholds. So the idea is simple, right? You get cash into the hands of businesses that need it so they can make payroll, keep their employees employed, and come out on the other side of this mess as well as can be expected given the circumstances. Now, what's also in the CARES Act is $17.2 billion for the Veterans Health Administration in order to hire new staff and make sure existing personnel have the resources they need to deal with the evolving needs of the pandemic. This funding has also already been used to add beds, provide overtime pay, and purchase much needed supplies like ventilators, pharmaceuticals, basic pharmaceuticals, and PPE for the Veterans Health Administration. So, I understand that the rollout has not been perfect. I never thought, Congress would vote on a $2 trillion bill that quickly. And, you're inevitably, there's going to be inefficiencies and unintended consequences when you do something that quickly when you're in the midst of a crisis. And there's also a related problem where the Small Business Administration has changed congressional intent that we wrote into the bill over the course of that process. There's a lot of work left to do, but it's important to acknowledge for a government that usually struggles to do anything, let alone quickly, it's pretty astounding that the SBA ran through the entirety of a $350 billion $350 billion in loans in just about 2 weeks. And so in Wisconsin, as of Monday alone, about 32,000 loans have been approved, totaling about $7 billion in loan relief from the SBA just in Wisconsin. And there are a lot of really good people at our banks and our credit unions that are moving heaven and earth to try and get these resources into the hands of businesses across our community. And so I'll just close by saying I know there's a lot left to do. Clearly, Congress is going to have to provide additional money for that Paycheck Protection Program since we've already run through it. I hope the Senate passes Leader McConnell's plan for an additional $250 billion for the program ASAP in order to ensure that companies and small businesses in areas like Northeast Wisconsin can continue to benefit. I know there have been some other implementation snags that are still an issue for many of you. I look forward to hearing more about what's working, what's not. Your feedback, good and bad, is invaluable as we look to what a future relief package looks like, a phase 3.5 or a phase 4.0 stimulus bill. But I just would say in closing that, if we've already seen the cost of 2 to 4 weeks of staying shut down, and it really is extraordinary, it's unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime, it would suggest that staying shut down is not a sustainable strategy. I was happy that the president announced this task force to reopen the economy. I'm under no illusions that we're going to be able to flip a light switch and everything's going to go back to normal. We shouldn't do that. But I do think the next phase of this, starting immediately, has to look like a bottom-up, community-driven, state-driven process where we figure out what social distancing and a strict quarantine of the more vulnerable population looks like, because it's going to look different in Green Bay, in the village of Alloway, than it looks down in Madison or Milwaukee, let alone Manhattan or Manhattan Beach. Final thing I'd say, as a veteran myself, I keep saying the final thing I say and then I go on. This is politics, my friends. We know that for the last 2 decades, really, our fellow veterans, our brothers and sisters in arms, are struggling with a lot of wounds of war, particularly invisible wounds. And the concern is that at a time when we're asking people to shelter in place and stay shut down and stay isolated, you could exacerbate that situation. So I just would encourage you, if you know someone who's struggling, or just, even someone who's not, reach out to your fellow veterans, check in on them. You know, it's up to us to lead the way, lead by example, lead from the front. And we really have to make sure that we are taking care of our fellow veterans in this crisis now more than ever. So with that, I'll stop talking and kick things over to Kurt.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Congressman. I really appreciate the kind remarks about WMC and what we've been doing during this crisis. But I refuse to accept the title of thought leader on this, because actually that does go to you, because you will recall that you called me back in March and said that, you know, we just began the Safer at Home, but we're going to need to talk about what happens next. So actually you started that conversation with WMC and the business community, and I really want to thank you for that.
Flattery will get you everywhere, Kurt.
And I do have to comment here, you know, I have to, some stereotypes, you know, the Chamber of Commerce is kind of seen as stuffed shirts, so I didn't want to disappoint, but actually I'm doing up front right after this, and so I thought I better put on a tie. I actually was trying to sport a quarantine beard. It was coming in very patchy, made me look mangy, and my wife finally told me that it had to go. So I actually like myself a little bit better without the beard. We're a little frustrated yesterday with the order being extended to the 26th of May. We had sent a letter to the governor last Thursday, along with 18 other business trade associations, sector-specific trade associations, and 33 local chambers of commerce, asking the governor to, one, not extend the order because we had been hearing rumors that it was going to be extended. Frankly, I thought if it was going to be extended, it would be for a week or perhaps to the 10th, which is when his order was going to run out. I didn't fathom that he was going to wait till after Memorial Day. That is, I mean, honestly, that's longer than where New York is, and of course, that's the epicenter of where the COVID-19 outbreak has really hit hard in the United States. We also asked the governor to work with the business community for a game plan on how we reopen the Wisconsin economy, how to get back to work, because as the congressman said, this is truly uncharted territory. Beyond war, beyond a massive natural disaster, something like Katrina, we've not really seen anything like this, and we've not seen anything like this in Wisconsin in 170 years of statehood. So no one really knows how to do it. But we had coordinated with a variety of business leaders from every sector, because we're the state chamber, we represent every sector of the economy. We're also the State Manufacturers Association, so we focus a lot on manufacturing. And we brought folks together, and we think that we have the framework of a plan that will work. And we're going to put that plan together regardless of the fact that we may now have to wait till the end of May in order to execute it. We believe that we can start opening up the economy as soon as next week, late next week, or the week after. Of course, the governor disagrees, but it's got to be based on risk assessment. And there are different risk profiles in different parts of the state. Milwaukee is obviously our epicenter. Dane County, Waukesha County, Ozaukee County, I believe all have the highest infection rates. But we have seen that the hospitalization rates have not come anywhere near the projections. And remember, we went to Safer at Home in order to protect the capabilities of the healthcare system. We didn't want to overwhelm the healthcare system, because the projections showed as we got more infections and more people had severe reactions to it, we were going to overutilize the healthcare system and you know, ventilators and ICU beds and et cetera and so on. That didn't happen. So from our frustration is that the Wisconsin infection rate, the Wisconsin hospitalization rate, and frankly the Wisconsin death rate does not justify, from our perspective, going all the way to May 26. When we do open, we want to do it smartly, we want to do it safely, we want to do it methodically. We need a plan. And again, it's got to be based on risk. So again, you have a different risk assessment in Milwaukee County than you do in Sawyer County. So as you look at different sectors, each one's a little bit different: an office environment, a construction site, warehouses, manufacturing, you name the business sector, and it has a different profile. And we have to make sure that, of course, workers feel comfortable coming back to the workplace, that they're safe, that there are protections, that we have disinfectants available to clean and sanitize workspaces and locations, PPE where necessary. Not everybody's going to need them, but of course the recommendation is to wear masks in public. office environments, you can stagger who works from home, who works in the office, and so I think that there are a variety of different steps that we can take to begin the process, and then slowly, incrementally phase in to get people back to work and to do so safely. Because as a congressman mentioned, this is a health crisis that has now become a very deep economic crisis. We're at 16% unemployment in the state of Wisconsin. We're ticking up a full percentage point about every 3 days. So that means by the end of the month, we're looking at 20% unemployment. And that is Great Depression level unemployment. The Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development projects unemployment to go to at least 27%. That's really unprecedented levels. And each day we delay getting people back to work, more people lose their job, more businesses will go bankrupt, and frankly, the longer it'll take for us to climb our way out of this deep hole.
Outstanding. We've had some questions. So I think now, if you're okay with it, Mr. Bauer and Congressman Gallagher, could we move on to the Q&A? Does that work for the two of you?
Absolutely.
Outstanding. Appreciate your insights. So first I'll start with Nancy. This is for Congressman Gallagher. What measures are you advocating for the future of our farmers? I think obviously given our deep and robust farming community here in Wisconsin, I think that's probably top in mind for a lot of people.
Yeah, so right now there's a huge disconnect that we're trying on the local level to fix, right? We've all seen images of our farmers having to dump milk, which they don't like to do, and it's not great for the environment either. At the same time, if you go to some grocery stores, particularly the smaller grocery stores, you'll see empty shelves, or you'll see those stores rationing the amount of milk you can buy. So how is it that at a time we're dumping, we're also restricting the supply of milk when it would seem we're oversupplied? So at least in my district, we've worked with all the grocery stores to stop that policy. It's more a supply chain disruption, right? There's very advanced just-in-time delivery systems for milk and eggs and things like that, that because of a radical change in consumer behavior, think of your own family, right? You're probably shopping for a week or 2 weeks right now, as opposed to multiple times throughout the week, or stopping at Quick Trip on your way home to get some extra milk. So that's part of it, and that's the most practical thing we do, but that's a drop in the bucket for what our dairy farmers need. What we're trying to get Secretary Perdue at the Ag Department to fix this problem is use the money that we appropriate for USDA in order to buy the excess supply of cheese that's out there right now, because in some ways cheese is more complex and difficult than milk, and then distribute that cheese across the country to all the food banks that need the support right now. Beyond that, I think the other thing we can do, and the entire delegation has asked them, is to change the margin coverage program that farmers bought into prior to the crisis, so that they get the coverage they need, given that the market has changed radically as a result of coronavirus. I think the bigger question that concerns me, and I'll admit I don't have an easy answer to you, is, if you're a big farm, a dairy farm right now, you'll probably be able to survive the crisis, but it's hard enough for you, given that the milk prices have been persistently low for the last few years. I worry about the small guys, and I worry this is going to drive further consolidation in an industry where we've already seen dramatic consolidation, and where effective oligopolies or monopolies don't help consumers and don't help the health of the entire industry. So I'm trying to figure out what the fix is for that. If you guys got ideas, happy to steal those ideas, but it is certainly a very difficult time for Wisconsin's dairy farmers right now. Oh, also just quickly, I forgot, we've asked the Small Business Administration to clarify that they aren't disqualified from getting dairy farmers aren't disqualified from getting the loans under the Paycheck Protection Program. So, hopefully, if we replenish the funds in the program, our dairy farmers can get access to that, $350 billion, which we're trying to replenish right now.
Outstanding. Thank you, Congressman. I'll move on to a question for Mr. Bauer. From Donald Placidi, how are you going to ensure the safety of those if you open the economy without adequate testing? Once opening up the economy, how are you going to ensure those that are asymptomatic are not exposing the vulnerable population? And so overarchingly, what is your proposal then to the governor?
Great question. And testing will have to be a part of this, and the governor talked about that. Initially, he had said that the reason for the safer at home was so that we didn't overwhelm the healthcare system, as I said. Yesterday, he said that we need to continue through the 26th until we have adequate PPE, test kits, and then contact tracing. I don't know to what extent we're going to have the testing in place, widespread testing in place by the 26th of May. I've had conversations with the companies in Wisconsin that are manufacturing those test kits that are doing the best that they can. I think that they've done amazing work in a short period of time. We've got Wisconsin companies that have shipped production over to PPEs. It's rather frustrating that we don't have enough, but this is a global pandemic and everybody needs all of the above. And Wisconsin is in the queue to try and get our fair share, but we don't have enough. So to answer your question specifically, again, I think it has to be a smart, phased-in plan that includes, of course, social distancing, making sure that workstations and people who come back to work are maintaining that 6 feet distance between each other, face masks so that we're not infecting each other. That's important because, you know, as the question said, oftentimes people are asymptomatic, but the face masks, of course, are designed to try and keep somebody who has the coronavirus from spreading it to somebody else. So I think that there are ways that we can do this safely. Again, it has to be incrementally, it has to be methodically, and I 100% understand businesses have a responsibility to make sure that their workforce is safe. And if you can't put in measures that adequately safeguard, then maybe it's not time for your business to open up. But we do believe that many businesses can begin that process of opening up. And, you know, businesses have to put those measures in place because workers aren't going to want to come back to a workplace where they feel it's unsafe. That's true, you know, with manufacturing or construction and the other types of risks that go along with those industries. That certainly is true now that we have COVID-19 out there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bauer. We have a follow-up question to that, but I wanted to backtrack a bit to a question to Congressman Gallagher. I'm trying to get everybody's questions in here. Can you speak about how Congress will ensure companies that are too big to be considered small businesses that are being impacted and laying off employees are going to get similar support as the true small businesses currently did? I was reading that verbatim. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. We'll follow up if I don't answer it adequately. First, I think it's important to understand in that 2.0 bill, those larger companies, 500 employees and above, were actually exempted from the sick leave and paid family leave requirements. So it is fair to say that the bigger companies were not saddled with the same burden that Congress put on the smaller companies. Now, I'm not saying that was right. In fact, that was one of my objections to the bill, but it is a fact that in that 2.0 measure, we put more of a burden on our smaller companies to pay their employees up to 10 weeks of paid leave related to coronavirus that the bigger companies didn't have to. But for those bigger companies, because think about, you know, it's not just a big company like, I mean, take your pick, right? Walmart or whatever. There's a lot of nonprofits that technically have bigger employees than that. Think about your local YMCA, who are struggling to get, because the YMCA is, the local one is part of a broader constellation and the same organization that has more than 500 employees, that are struggling to get access to these loans because of the unintended consequences of that provision. So one thing we're trying to convince Pelosi to agree to in a 3.5 or a 4.0 bill is to get Treasury to use the Main Street lending program for businesses up to 10,000 employees. Treasury's thinking through this right now and trying to do it just through their regulatory latitude. But under this process, Treasury would ask lenders, small banks, medium-sized banks, credit unions, to process loans and applications in a similar way they're doing with that Paycheck Protection Program right now. And Treasury would then back 95% of the loan. So Treasury buys up to 95% of the loan, lenders retain 5%. The loan has about a 4-year maturity, if I'm remembering correctly, and that can be deferred for a year. So right now we're trying to expand the loan process to address those bigger companies, but we may need to fix it in a 3.5 or a 4.0 bill.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. Let's see, make sure I'm getting all these. Going back to Mr. Bauer on the question of, let's see, opening up the economy versus, ensuring that we're keeping people safe while, it's a balancing act between that and the economy. And the follow-up question to the previous one was, so how would it have then been possible to open up the economy at the originally forecast time? I think this person's looking for specific, what are those proposals for the gradual rollout of reopening the economy in an ideal world prior to May 26th? Like, what are those increments? What's that safe?
Well, again, it'll be based on risk. And so you're looking at population density, which is obviously a risk factor. You're looking at hospitals' capabilities and census. So how many hospitals do you have? How many beds are available? How many ICU beds are available? What is the inventory of ventilators? Basically the items that you need if you have a severe outbreak of COVID-19. And of course, then it relates to sector, as I've already talked about, because different sectors have a different risk profile. Retail has a risk profile that's probably a little bit higher than, say, a warehouse or even an office environment where you can take mitigating steps to make sure that you're social distancing. Obviously, there are other things that you need to do. You need to reinforce the basic health hygiene, washing your hands, again, social distancing, sanitizing areas, wear masks or gloves or PPEs where appropriate. We talked a little bit about widespread testing, which I think will be important, but we're not ready yet, and I don't know that we will be by May 26th. Hopefully we will. I have my doubts about that just based on capacity and the ability to manufacture, and the fact that test kits have to be administered by, or tests have to be administered by trained professionals, and then of course it takes on the fast end about 2 days in order to get the test back, and of course from the time when you get tested to the time you get the results, you could have contracted the disease in the meantime. And then of course you can do temperature checks as people come to work, something that we're talking about and may be widespread and may become commonplace, at least until we have a vaccine in place, or we have better drugs to tap down the ill effects and the severe effects of COVID-19. Like I said, I think that you can start that process sooner than May 26th to be sure, but a plan has to be in place. We're in the process of piecing that together. It's mostly done. We were planning on having an executive summary of that out by Saturday because we were hoping that we were going to open up on the 24th. I think we have a little bit more time to refine it, but and the Milwaukee Chamber will have something out today as well. I was talking with Tim Sheehy both last night and this morning. They will have something very similar to us, although theirs will be specific to the Milwaukee region. Again, a high-risk region. We're a statewide organization, so we're taking a broader approach, but our approach is one size doesn't fit all. We're a big state geographically, and what works in Milwaukee may not apply very well in Wood County.
So are you then proposing a rollout by county or by region, by city, rather than the entire state?
It would have to be based on risk assessments. So, like I said, I'm not saying that you can't begin going back to work in Milwaukee County where we have the highest infection rates, but then you have to look at the specific sector and what safeguards can be put in place to protect the employee. Because as I said earlier, we have a mandate as employers to make sure that our workers are safe. And that's true beyond COVID-19, and that's especially true as it relates to COVID-19.
Outstanding. Congressman Gallagher, I actually have a question personally that I think I've been curious about this. Let's say we were able to say we're in a safe situation where we can, maybe not flick the switch, maybe turn the dial and roll out safely a gradual reopening of our economy and our businesses in the state. I think on the opposite end of where the businesses are, we still have consumers and employees and employers, maybe in businesses, that might still have a fear or a doubt about the safety about that. We could reopen businesses, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee that consumers and shoppers are going to have the confidence to leave their house. What thoughts do you have on reconciling that? Because opening a business doesn't guarantee revenue, right?
Yeah, well, you're 100% right to identify that. I mean, think about seasonal businesses there are in my neck of the woods, right, in Door County, where they lose money in the winter months and then have to make that back up in the summer. But if they can't count on people, going to Door County Brewing Company, going to Sister Bay with the same enthusiasm that they usually do, then they're going to be in a very difficult situation. So, there's no easy answer, but I do think it adds a sense of urgency to what Kurt is talking about, which is the sooner we start to think through the next phase of this and have the humility to say, neither the governor nor the president, and certainly no member of Congress, can design a one-size-fits-all thawing out of our economy, that we have to figure out, just as Kurt's looking at it from a statewide perspective, we need the Green Bay Chamber, the Fox Valley Chamber to identify how they're going to figure it out. Just start to dip our toe into that deep end of, okay, we could open up the state parks again next week, right? We can figure that one out. That's easy, right? The governor is allowing people to golf again. That's easy. Start to build that momentum based on the low-hanging fruit. And then I think a month from now, people will have more confidence and be willing to start going to their restaurants again. My hope is that in the intervening month, they're still finding a way to get takeout and keep those businesses alive. So no easy answer to it, but the sooner we think through it and the sooner we start to learn through experimentation, and we will assume risk. Kurt's 100% right. There's no plan short of hermetically sealing all of ourselves in plastic bubbles that eliminates all health risk. It does not exist. So this is going to be a difficult balance between the unique needs of our state economy and trying to follow the advice of our medical and health experts who are trying to keep us alive.
Outstanding. Thank you very much. Another follow-up question. I think I did Nikki's question adequately. Follow-up from Donald. What is your position on using the Defense Powers Act to build up testing and adequate PPE?
Well, I'm glad that we've invoked it. The president is using it. There was some original controversy over whether he was using Title III of the Defense Production Act. And at the time, they weren't invoking it because they were getting the cooperation they needed from private industry to start producing things. Then there was a little bit of a controversy with GE, I think, that then convinced the president to invoke it. But largely, our problem is not that private industry is refusing to comply with government. I mean, certainly here in Wisconsin, every day I have another company coming to me saying, how do I get approved by the FDA to start producing masks, even though my manufacturing company makes something different? So I think it's fair to say now we are using the authorities of the Defense Production Act in order to try and ramp up production as much as possible. There are limits, however, to what we can achieve. In fact, I think what makes this a little bit different and more difficult than, let's say, our mobilization for World War II, right? Freedom's Forge, great book, read that. It's all about how, our car company started producing bombers and we won the war because we have an innovative economy and all the manufacturers stepped up. Well, we can't do that today. One, because the timeline for a pandemic is different than war. We actually had years to mobilize prior to Pearl Harbor, whereas this virus spread so fast that, if we're still talking a month from now about getting point of care tests, I mean, come on. I mean, it's already spread. But secondly, since World War II, we've offshored so much of our manufacturing that, as we're discovering with testing, there are various single points of failure in the supply chain that make it very difficult for us to flip a switch, even when we give the president extraordinary authority like that under the Defense Production Act, because so much of the supplies are abroad, right? Look at the medical devices we're trying to produce. Look at our drugs. 80% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients for American drugs come from abroad, come from China in particular. So we've created this vulnerability where our supply chains are so brittle, which is why I think when the dust settles on all of this, when we get through this, and we will, I think it is inevitable, regardless of actually who's in the White House come January 2021 or 2024, that we will embark on a process of selectively decoupling from China, because we simply can't be this dependent on a foreign country that is in some areas actively hostile to our interests.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Congressman. And Donald says thank you for answering all of his questions there. I think if there's no further questions for Mr. Bauer, Congressman Gallagher, I know that you all have been very, very gracious with your time and giving us your time. Thank you so very much. And I know you had another commitment that you had to get to, and I think we're running over on that. So apologies, and very appreciative of your time, both of you gentlemen, and for your participation in this with the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. And yeah, stay safe out there.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Go
Thanks
Navy.
a lot, Congressman. Good seeing you.
All right. Thank you. And folks that are on the call, we'll go ahead and continue. We do have another segment of this morning. We'll go ahead and turn it over to the executive director of the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce, the one and only Mr. Saul Newton, who is going to give you an update on things that are happening in the state and with the state veteran community, as well as with the Veterans Chamber. So stay tuned. Here it is.
Thank you, Adam. And thank you all of you for taking the time to join us today. I know they hopped off, but just want to express our appreciation to Mr. Bauer and Congressman Gallagher for making themselves available and sharing that information with us. I wanted to take this opportunity to address all of you, just to talk a little bit about what we are doing as an organization to respond to this crisis, to make sure that our members, as well as non-members, the business community across the state, are being served and supported during this time. So, like all of you, we've been closely monitoring the spread of COVID-19, monitoring the associated public health and economic impacts, and acting as quickly as possible to ensure that our members and our community are informed, that they have access to the resources that they need, and that they receive the support and assistance to make it through this period with as little interruption as possible. Along with our partners in the private and public sectors, we have really buckled down and put ourselves more or less on a war footing, if you will, because we are here as an organization precisely for situations like this. When veterans, when service members, their families need assistance, when the veteran business community is in need of support, we are here. And it's fair to say that many individuals and businesses across the state are in need of critical assistance and support, and we're here to provide it. I want to make sure that all of you know, all of our members know, that there's no resource that's out of reach. There's no course of action that is too fast, and no commitment too deep when it comes to ensuring the success of Wisconsin's veteran business community for us. As we have been for the last 4 weeks, our first concern is, in order to overcome this crisis, we are actively sharing accurate, reliable information as quickly as we possibly can. If you have not already looked at it. We've compiled a COVID-19 member guide with information and resources for business owners, for employers, for service providers, and for individuals, and that's available on our website. Obviously, as we've seen over the last few weeks, the situation changes rapidly, and we are doing everything we can to share relevant, accurate information with all of you as quickly as possible. So if you are not subscribed to our newsletter and you're not following us on social and digital media channels, please make sure to do that so that you receive the most information, the most up-to-date information as quickly as it becomes available. As these quarantines and shutdowns and social distancing and safer at home orders are extended, we know businesses and individuals are going to need resources to help them make it through this period. We're very fortunate to have a broad network and a deep network of resource providers and assistants from the public sector, from nonprofit and community organizations, and private sector partners. We have been and will continue to share information about all of those resources as soon as they become available. And we encourage all of you to lean on us, call, email, message at any time, and we will respond to you. If you, for any reason, need to reach out to me, you can reach me on my cell phone. That number is 414-207-6106. Again, 414-207-6106. I'll put that information in the chat box as well. Please feel free to call or text. You can also email me, and I'll put my email in the chat box as well. Just so that all of you know, we're committed to providing all of our members with benefits and providing them with value to help them grow and support their business, especially during this time. While those of you who have been involved with the organization for a while know that we frequently in previous times have hosted events, while we've had to postpone those events, we're proactively ensuring that we as an organization are providing our members with cost savings, with marketing, promotional and advertising opportunities, with direct assistance and technical assistance while we move our educational programming and events to online and remote platforms. Meanwhile, we'll be offering as much information on business, workforce, and community development on our digital platforms, including social media and our website. The needs of our members, the challenges facing business, the support required by veterans and service members and their families certainly have not stopped during this crisis, and for that reason, neither will we. We will be here every step of the way with you. Lastly, I want to make sure to mention, we must remember that military service members and their families are being particularly impacted at this time. We know that Wisconsin National Guard soldiers and airmen are being activated and are being, in some cases, being sent into hotspots or being relied upon for healthcare support. And we know that military families' lives are being disrupted by travel bans and workplace changes, and we must do what we can as a business community to ensure that those who are serving our state and our country, as well as their families, are supported. Check out Military OneSource. Military OneSource is offering resources and information for service members and their families. If we have any service members or families listening right now, please reach out to us if there's anything that we can do to provide support or to assist you during this time. As veterans, as service members, we know what it means to be resilient. We know how to rally around each other. We know not to leave anyone behind, and for that reason, our community is strong. We will get through this together. There's nothing we can't do together, and we're in this together, and we will get through this together. So with that, I want to lastly mention, as Adam mentioned at the beginning of the call, that we work with a broad array of nonprofit and community partners around the state. These are organizations that are providing critical support to vulnerable populations, whether that's housing, health and wellness, economic mobility and assistance, employment assistance. And we know during times of crisis like this, these are the organizations that see their the need for their services increase dramatically, while also seeing revenues and donations and support decrease dramatically, simply because of the impact of crises like this. And so that's why we've created the COVID-19 Relief Fund. We know that as an organization, we rely on a lot of these partners to support our members, and we want to make sure that they're able to make it through this as well, in addition to the small businesses that we work with. So if you have anything, $5, $10, please consider contributing to the COVID-19 Relief Fund. As Adam mentioned, every dollar that is collected will be matched. So your impact doubles, and we can really rally around and support these organizations. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Outstanding, thank you, Saul. So if anyone has any questions, you can throw it in the chat on the right-hand side. Otherwise, if you have called in, I can unmute all, which I will do right now, and give you an opportunity to throw your questions out there verbally. If you're a caller, go ahead and just throw it out there. But in the meantime, I did put a link for the United Wisconsin Veteran Serving Nonprofit COVID-19 Relief Fund on the right-hand side. Every bit counts. Please donate to that. We are running out of time. The timeline for this relief fund, it's the end of the month, and then we'll be distributing the funds out shortly thereafter to veteran serving nonprofits that are in need. And another reminder, I pasted a link to it down there, is to join our master class, learn about Twitter, learn how to grow a massive and valuable following. If you, like me, are somebody that just doesn't understand Twitter and needs to learn about that, I'm going to be taking the class. Randy's an expert, so I'm excited to be there. So please sign up. That's an absolute steal, because he's a pro, and he's giving you some hands-on, step-by-step information on how to develop that following. Any other questions from callers or writers or attendees? Excellent. Okay, well, again, my name's Adam with the Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Please join us every Friday for these COVID-19 briefings, providing resources and insights and guests and all that fun stuff. So looking forward to seeing you on the call next week. Everybody have a safe and healthy weekend. We'll see you next time.